Okay, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for our continued webinar series. And today we are going to be covering the setting up and sharing of chemical recommendations. And we will focus mostly on, like we said, kind of doing a deep dive into creating your own product database that you would use throughout the season. And then in addition to that, building up chemical mixes, which would be easy to access from a mobile app or when you're getting to the point of writing those chemical recommendations. So like I said, agenda here, we're going to walk through the couple ways that we can support as FarmQA you bringing your products in, that being importing directly from a CSV file that you may already have in existence, or doing it directly within FarmQA where you can do a search on EPA numbers, EPA names. The third way being just the manual creation of products and filling in details within our system. From there, we'll talk through how you can create tank mixes, which combines multiple products into a mix, which you can then nickname, assign to certain crops that it can be sprayed on, give it a mix order, that sort of thing. Then finally, we'll walk through the process of actually writing the recommendation, how we can share that, and then walk through the reporting, the reporting side as well, and what report options we provide to you. So with that, I want to spend most of my time in the product doing a live demo. So we will jump over to Controller. This is our web platform, and this is where we're going to do most of the setup as far as getting your account ready to write recommendations. So if you newly onboarded, create an account, you may have some demo products. You can always clean those out or delete them out under settings. You would have a delete option to start fresh from a chemical list. However, within the advice tab is where we're going to focus our time when it comes to the setup of a product database. So we have advice on the left-hand side, products is a tab on the top left. This is the interface that we provide to show you all of the chemicals that you have within your FarmQA account. And as you can see here in my demo data, I've got a pre-populated list of chemicals as I've already added them. However, we'll walk through the 3 steps or the 3 different ways that you can import data into FarmQA. So the first way we'll talk through is actually through an import. And so the import process does have to go through the FarmQA support team. But as far as the layout of what that export and import would look like would be something like I'm showing here. This is an Excel file, and the key things to point out, this is maybe more of a simplified import where you've got product names. If you have an alternate registered name, product type, the units are defined in here as well with a particular dropdown that would match up to our unit system. And then additionally, you can have registration number, rainfast, reentry intervals as columns as well. So if you had a list similar to this format or could massage it into a layout like this, we can then ingest that, import it, and you would do that through sending an email to support@farmqa.com or through me, ben.munson@farmqa.com. Now, a secondary option to that, and this would be more of a detailed import. So if you did want to utilize all of the attributes that we're tracking per chemical, you could see this be an example. This is actually some Canadian products, but you can see in here similar columns, but there's additional information in here as far as the target, meaning what are you targeting when you're spraying this particular product, whether it's white mold, Cercospora, Sclerotinia, etc. But then in addition to that, you can put your own product links in here. So if you've got your own product labels, a list of what crops something can be sprayed on, and then similarly getting into the pre-harvest days, re-entry hours, etc., are all things that you can track. So both of these documents will be available in our support page. So if you find the document on how to import products, you'll find a reference to these templates, which you can then populate with your own chemicals and then send to one of the support team members. Now, the second way to do the import, and really this works quite well if you have just a handful of products and it's through the EPA. And what we're doing here is if you look in the interface and click the new product option, you get a drop-down list of the actions you can take, the first one being an import from the EPA. So obviously this is more specific to our US customers. However, if you are in Canada, you could still import from the EPA, which would then populate with your active ingredients, your mode of actions, but then you could simply adjust the registration name, and if you wanted to put in a different label, you could do that as well. Regardless here, I'm going to click the EPA, and this is pulling data via an API from the EPA, and we can search their database on the chemical name. So I'll search in this case silencer, and we'll get options matching that. In this case, there's only one product, and that's the one I was looking for. I can click the plus button, and now you can see it loads it into a queue. It says one product to import, but we can continue to search here. So now if I search for a second product, let's just say Endura. Now in this case, I see multiple options, but the key thing here is you can always look visually across the registration number, across the status date to make sure it's the one that you would like to import. Additionally, what we can do is we can search by that EPA number. So if I want to search for Endura, I could do the 7969-197, and now it should snap down and find me that product as well. So you can search on either one of those attributes. Something to note is that the EPA doesn't always keep up with the product names, and so if you're not finding the product you're looking for simply based on the name, a better way to do that in that particular scenario is to then search on the specific EPA number. Regardless, I'll add that product, and it adds it into our upload queue. So it says 2 products to import. And what we can do now, you can actually view all the products that you have queued up to upload. If that looks correct, you can click Add Products. And now what it'll do is it'll pull down and populate some of the cells that we're seeing here. So silencer was one of the first products that I searched, and you can see it categorized this as an insecticide. It breaks it down with a name, registration name, manufacturer. Within here, it also does pull in the labels. One thing to note is this is the EPA label, so it's going to stamp the approval letter first, followed by the label. But this is going to be available to you from the mobile app as well. The other thing that the EPA loads in would be your active ingredients, and so that's going to be pre-populated. And we do periodically run a script on our side to then bring in the mode of action groups automatically. And so that is where we get, if I jump over to a product like Acheron, you can see the breakdown of mode of action groups here listed by active ingredient, as you can see. And so that will, if you add a product to the EPA, and like I said, we periodically run that, so it would automatically add these for you in certain intervals of time when we run that script. A couple other things to note. I'm going to go back to silencer, but at any point in time, you can use the search box in the top right, and that will look through all the products you have in FarmQA, and you can identify the one you're looking for by searching in that way. What I wanted to point out is one thing that may be of interest or you'd want to populate would be the rate. And if we enter this in this interface, this is going to be a default rate for the product. And so we can now choose the units to associate with that. We do have different unit types based on your geography. So when you create a FarmQA account, you would identify your default measurement system. And so we would then serve up a metric list, unit list for you, a US or imperial, or we also have a Canadian system that combines the 2 unit systems. With that said, if we set the units, this will be the default for the silencer in this case, but on the mobile side in a mix, you can always adjust this so you're not locked into that rate. It's just going to be a starting point to streamline the recommendation process. Now, the EPA import does not strip out the pre-harvest intervals, rainfast, REI information from the label. So that is something that you would have to populate in here if you wanted to have this information available on your recommendations. The same thing goes for associated crops. You can see all the crops that we could spray silencer on within this view. And then the same thing goes for application methods. Application periods can be set, along with notes that would get tracked. So if you have perhaps a certain container size that this product gets purchased in, this is a good place to document that, and it would be tracked all throughout FarmQA. Another thing to note within this interface is if we look to the right-hand side, we have a label, EPA labels populated, but we've had the request for secondary labels. And so we allow you to add those to the product. And so in this case, if I want to attach a secondary label for silencer, in this case, I did download a secondary label, which I can simply drag and drop into the attachments. And now that will also be available to you to reference when you're doing or writing your recommendations. If I clear out my search and I'll go over to a product that I know I've used, I'll make sure to save these details. If I go over to a product that I know I've used in some of my mixes, we also list that here so you can know which chemical combinations you're using Acheron in, and then you can hyperlink over to those mixes from this screen. As you saw me do in the previous screen, if you do add any sort of notes in here or make any changes, you want to save. On the top left, there's the black save button, and that would take any updates that you make to the product. Continuing on, we also have mixes, and actually I should take a step back. The third way to add products here is manually. So we showed you the import from CSV, from the EPA. If you don't find what you're looking for, or perhaps it's an adjuvant, you can add in a new product, and this is simply allowing you to manually populate each of the cells to build up your database. And as you can see here, we can choose from our type, so maybe it is an adjuvant, or in this case, if you want to build up a fertilizer product in our system, you could do this manually as well. And one thing I do want to show on the fertilizer side is one good way to do fertility recs in FarmQA is actually to build up blends within our product tab. And the reason we do that is so that then you can give it a total rate when we bring it in to a mix. And I'll show you what I mean by that here as I go through here. But if you want to do a starter blend, for example, and on the right-hand side, I can add ingredients. So this is where I could say, maybe we've got AMS, and then we'll put MAP in here as well. So we can list those out as the ingredients to our mix in this case. And then we can also designate a percentage that we're giving to each of those ingredients. And what this allows us to do, as I was saying, is once we do create this, and we'll give this a pounds per acre default unit, but we can leave the rate blank so that if there's not really a consistent number that we're recommending on this, then we just populate it each time when you write the recommendation. But as I was saying, now if we do it in that fashion and we manually create a fertility product, now when we create the mix, and we'll say that this is again, just call this the starter blend, and now we add our products, and let's say I just want to add this one starter blend product into my mix. As I was saying, the value of doing it this way is now we can give a rate to the entire starter blend per field. So I could say this is 100 pounds per acre of this particular blend of AMS and MAP combined at those 30%, 70% ratios. And then we can also, from the mix, be putting in what crops this can be applied on and recommended as well. So that was a process of creating a fertility mix, but I also want to talk through the scenario that might be more applicable, perhaps of combining a herbicide mix. So within this interface, what you're seeing is all the mixes that I have already created, and at any point in time, you can search in the top right to say, show me all the mixes that have Abound in them, and then you can click on the hyperlinks on the left, and it will pull up the full details. Click into the products to see within that Abound, what are the details within this mix. But going back to actually creating the mix, if I now on the top right-hand side, click the new mix option, this is gonna provide a blank canvas, if you will, where I can now put in my mix, and we'll just call this a wheat herbicide 3. And within this add product option, this is where it pulls up all of our individual products within our database, and I can search for things like Everest, and I've got a combination here that I want to use. We'll call this Unison. I'm going to put wide match in, and as you're seeing, I'm searching, selecting the products, and then something to note in this screen is the order that you select the products in will get pushed into your mix order. So now when I add this, we imply the mix order on recommendations by what products are shown first in the list versus last. So if you do want to use our built-in mix order functionality, you'll want to drag and drop these products to match the mix order you want the applicator to use. So in this case now, I've got my mix created. You saw how easy it was to add those products. But now a couple additional things that I can do is I can set a water volume. And to any previous FarmQA users, this is a new function in 2022 where we can now add in, let's say this is going to be sprayed at 12 gallons per acre. And the value of entering it in this fashion is we can now do product totals on things like maybe you've got an adjuvant that's sprayed in 1 quart, 2 quarts per 100 gallons. We can now figure the total amount needed and do our automatic product totals on those units, given that we now know how much water is going down per field. We also have instructions in here, so you can add any sort of notes to say, make sure to spray Everest first, or I should say mix. And these would just be notes that you'll see how that'll flow onto the final report. We can put, similar to the products, we can put a target. So let's just say this is going after broadleafs. You can type that in, and then we can also be targeting what crops we're going to spray this on. Within the right-hand side, we can adjust these details. So as I was saying on the product side, we give the products a default rate, but now we can adjust this. So if we want to, let's say instead of 1 pint, I want this at 12 fluid ounces, or maybe 13. We can adjust that and save it. And now this will be available when I'm writing my recommendations as a pre-created, saved template, if you will, or a spray plan of this combination of chemicals. Okay, so that covers most of the setup side of the products. And now we'll just talk through how you can utilize this database we've just created. So a couple ways that we can write our recommendations. One would be from the mobile application. So if you would prefer to, let's say you're out in the field, you scouted it, you want to write the recommendation immediately. The best use case for that would be from this mobile app, where we can click on a field to enter that information from the map view, or we can go to fields, and let's say I want to search all my hard red spring wheat. I can see those fields, select the one I want to write a recommendation for. And now from here, if I click on that boundary, the add observation is my scouting form, but in this case, I want to showcase how we can write a recommendation. So I'll click the recommendation option. We automatically select the field that you are in, but note that you can also search from this view and write a recommendation that's going to pertain to multiple fields. Once I do that, it'll bring those fields into the recommendation, but I have the opportunity here to add field-specific notes. A couple use cases to this would be if I want to specify a custom area, I can do, in this case, it's a spot spray or a partial spray, and I'll say borders only. So you can use it in that fashion, or you can simply use it just to add notes to say spray first, and maybe this one's going to be sprayed second. So it's just a written spray order for your applicator. Now, the key piece here is how we actually add the chemicals into the recommendation. We have the add product option here, and this will allow you to search your individual product database, where I could search for based on product name, EPA number. You can search on the crop it can be sprayed on, and also the target. So if you wanted to look for anything that can be sprayed on broadleafs, I guess there you go. So then it would pull up those options. The more common way and more streamlined process is actually through using these mixes. So if I choose mix, this is going to serve up the list of the mixes that I had. And as I scroll through this, I can see all my mixes, or I can search, and this will be searchable depending on how you name your mixes. In this case, I was naming them corn-insecticide, for example, but you could give it whatever naming convention you wanted, and then that would become searchable. Key thing to note here is that you can thumb through these mixes so you can see what combination of chemicals are within them. And in my case, I will jump down into my wheat mix, and as I pull this up, this would be the chemical combination I used, and it will populate the mix orders, the rates that I had pre-created. But at this point in time, I can click into any one of these chemicals, and I can still adjust the rate. So even though on the mix I said this is going to be 2 ounces, I'm now boots on the ground in the field, and I say, no, this needs to be bumped up to 3 ounces. I'm doing this on the fly. But in addition, I can also see the details at the bottom of the screen where I can view the product labels. So I can pull up, in this case, that label to see what rate should I spray this on. And the other thing that we're going to show down here is a registration number. We can also display I think I have it on this product, here we go, the pre-harvest interval, rainfast, and REI information. Once that's populated, you can remove products. If you swipe left, you can delete them, or you can just, like I was saying, add individual products on top of a mix. So in this case, perhaps you have this pre-created mix, but then as you add product, you could also say we need to put on maybe an additional product of a bound. The other thing, as we scroll through here, we can see that the water volume will pre-populate, still adjustable. Same thing goes for your pre-harvest intervals, rainfast, and REI. And then these instructions could be specific to this particular application, where you could say spray now. Priority levels and start and end dates are optional, but as you can see here, you can populate a priority level, start and end date, which we can then filter on the completer reports to see what needs to happen in what order. But at this point, we can now submit this recommendation. We can, as I did that, it will submit back to our web platform, but we can pull it up immediately on the mobile application. So if we look at the bottom, we see the advice tab. If I click on that, it's pulling up all of my past recommendations or previously written recommendations. And I can filter this down by my organizational tree. So if I just wanted to see those recommendations for North Dakota farm, I could be doing that. In this case, I just want to show you what the output is going to look like for that. In this case, it was the wheat recommendation, and I did it across multiple fields. And so this is going to be a rolled up or a summary view of that recommendation, where in this case, you would see your logo, you'd see some information as far as who wrote the recommendation and on what date. But now as we look through field by field, we're seeing the unique product rates and maybe any notes that you put in there specific to this field. So spray first in this case. But then note that these product totals are going to be based on your field size, your known field size in FarmQA. And then we're pulling out your water volumes and then telling you the total amount of water needed per field. As we scroll through here, we see a different product total here, given that it's a larger field. And then I want to point out as well that this is what the partial spray would look like if we did, in this case, just spray the borders. It's the 15 acres, and then that 15 acres is what we use for the product totals. At the bottom, we show what we call a shopping cart. So this is the rolled up total across all of those 3 fields. And then in here is where we show your priority level, your start and end dates, along with your pre-harvest intervals, reentry intervals, etc. If you want an even more rolled up or summarized view, you can go to this select option within our recommendations. And then this would allow you to select multiple recommendations and combine those into one single PDF. And what we can do in our PDF customization window here is I can actually hide the per field totals. And then as I do this, this will actually collapse and provide, like I was saying, even more condensed view, in the sense that we still have the shopping cart, but it's going to be across 3 different recommendations, and it's 11 fields total. And so as I scroll through here, you can see that these were all of my hard red spring wheat recommendations, but we've collapsed the details. So if we want to compare it back to a recommendation like this, we now only show the rates once, but then all the fields that need to get sprayed with this combination are shown. As we scroll down, these would be your corn mixes. And then additionally, this could be a second corn mix, but a slightly different chemical combination or rates. So this is the most condensed view that you can get in FarmQA, but you can customize as far as what this looks like. If it does get condensed, if the product totals show up first or last, things like that. One thing to quickly point out while we're in this view is that a user can mark when these recommendations are completed. So from this view, I've selected a recommendation. It contained multiple fields. And if I just sprayed field 106, I can select the date and the time at which I did that. And then that will be a record within FarmQA for when that happened. So I've now completed that rec. It does show up with the yellow exclamation point as it's only partially completed. Only one of the 3 fields has been sprayed, and that's what the different status represents. Whereas the red X is 0 completed, and then if I've got a green check mark, that means all fields contained in that rec have been sprayed. Along those lines, we have a couple ways that we can view this data from the web view as well. One way to do this is through our table view, where you can see these are all the recommendations are written, which you can break down by time period. You can search this by an agronomist or who wrote it. You can also search it by a field name, let's say 106. Now here's all the recs that I've written in the last 30 days in that field. And then something to note here is you can see the completion date and time, who wrote the recommendation. And then the unique thing in FarmQA is we are allowing you to see these group numbers. And so one practical use case there is that you can go back as far as you've been using FarmQA, you can see your farm records of what's been sprayed in that field. And then you can identify if you've got resistance issues, which mode of actions have you been using a lot of across your rotations. Once you're in this view, if you click on in the date, there's a hyperlink where it'll actually bring you into the details of that spray. One thing I wanted to point out is if you write a recommendation in the mobile side or from the web view, and you purely do it based on a combination of chemicals, but then you want to turn that into a mix that you can then reuse, you can do that from our web view by using this mix button. So now if I click create mix, it will push this into the mix creation interface, where we can now just give this a name called herbicide. If I could spell. And now we could call this herbicide spray 4.0. And then you could save that, and then that's now a reusable mix going forward. The other way we can view recommendations is from the list view. And so this is what we call our field journal view. And it really is helpful for the farm level records, looking back year over year. So what I've done here is I've gone back into 2021, and I want to see everything I sprayed on this field called East Quarter. So if I click on this field, it now brings up the detail pane on the left-hand side. But what I want to point out is that there's this 17 events. And so events would be any point in time you've captured information in FarmQA for a field. As we look through here, as I was saying, this is a second place that you can see those recommendations. It's also alongside our other event types like your harvest dates, planted dates, scouting reports, and your recommendations. But one view that I wanted to point out here is that you can filter down to just see what you sprayed in this field in 2021. The check mark indicates if it's been marked as completed or not, and then it would also be tracking the date at which you sprayed it. But now if I export to PDF, this will now have a rolled up record with the automatic product totals of what you sprayed in that field. So now looking at this is similar to the last report I showed, but it's looking across time to say this was on 8/24 we sprayed, November 16th we had a different chemical combination. And then if you do mark sprays as completed, this is the view you would get. So it would say the completion date and time, but we'd also stamp in the temperature, wind speed, wind direction at the time of application. And then in this case, you can see that I did a partial spray, so that's being tracked as well. The important part I wanted to call out is if we do scroll down, this is where you'd see the rolled up product totals. And within this is now going to be for compliance, that sort of thing, is you can now have a record of what was sprayed, and you can easily, like I said, do this year over year, season over season, is you would have that log in FarmQA as a digital record keeping tool. One other thing as it pertains to recommendations is if you've got scouts that are out in the field and they do the scouting portion of the workload, you can then, as an agronomist, go in and visualize. Let's go to a report with more details. You can see what that scout was finding in the field, view their pictures, and then in addition to that, you can then use this recommendation button, which would then bring up the interface to write the recommendation but it would automatically associate it to the scouting report. And so the reason I point this out is you don't have to write the recommendation from the mobile app. It could be done from the web view at a computer. You have more screen real estate, etc. We also allow you to link recommendations to scouting reports and vice versa. So if you did happen to write the recommendation on the app and it didn't get tagged to the scouting report, you can link a recommendation, and now it will pull up all available or unlinked reports, or sorry, recommendations that were written for this field. So now I could select here and click add, and then it would link the two events together so that when you generate the report, you would get the combined view instead of those being isolated reports. And when I say combined view, this would be the detailed view where you have the scouting information along with the recommendation on one page. The last thing to note here is under settings, we do have our usage tab, and as it pertains to recommendations, you can see when you made your chemical recommendations, when they were completed, and then as we view through here, you can see the top products used, how many times that they were recommended. You can see the top fields that were sprayed, and then in addition, what mixes were used most commonly. So with that, that is all the time we had for this webinar, but we want to leave plenty of time for questions. If anybody has any that come up in anything related to recommendations or just more broadly on the product itself. But this will now be a record looking back on how to do the setup side of the recommendation tool within FarmQA. So please continue to tune in. We've got upcoming webinars every other week on Tuesdays. Next week is going to be, the next webinar is going to be on our sensor integration piece. So we're going to touch on soil moisture probes, the weather station integration, some compaction data we have flowing in. So please tune into that, and we would love to hear any questions you have now. You can send into Teams, and I will address those. Thank you.